Hey everyone, we are in the last week of our series called GPS, and we've been looking at people who had to make a decision. Do I follow God or do my own thing? And so in the first week, we learned about Ruth, and Ruth had a decision to make. Do I follow God and stay with Naomi, or do I take the easy way out and go back to my hometown? And she decided to stay with Naomi. She stayed and followed God. And then last week, we learned about Israel and how they had God as their king. But then they saw what everyone else had, and they wanted a human king like everyone else. And so they had a decision to make. Were they going to follow God or get a human king? And they decided to have a human king. So today we're going to look at who this king is and what he's all about, and if he follows God or does his own thing. And so here's a picture of him. And so they get this king. And Israel had an idea of what they wanted this king to be like. They wanted a king that was, and even they ended up getting it, a handsome man who was tall and who looked really good on the outside. But Israel got a leader who only looked good on the outside. He didn't look good on the inside. And he didn't have good character. And not like a cartoon character, but like a character, who you are on the inside and how you act. And so this was not good, okay? God cares more about who we are on the inside than how we look on the outside. And Saul didn't have very good character. So Samuel, we learned about Samuel last week, but Samuel, he went to go find this new king. And guess where they find him? Hiding. Let's read 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 22 through 24. It says, "So they asked the Lord, 'Where is he? Where is this king?' And the Lord replied, 'He is hiding among the baggage.' So they found him, brought him out, and he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. He was really tall. Then Samuel said to all the people, 'This is the man the Lord has chosen as your king. No one in all Israel is like him.' And all the people shouted, 'Long live the king.'" Now, if you were to have a king, how would you want your king to be? Maybe courageous, a really good leader, someone who loved God. Now, does this sound like Saul? Where did they find Saul? They found Saul hiding in baggage. And that does not sound very courageous to me. And so they find him, and he ends up being the leader, and he was tall, a head and shoulder and head taller than everyone else. So he was tall. Now, there are certain people who are good with the role. Like, I would think about the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. Now, if Patrick Mahomes was your school teacher, he may not be the best school teacher, but your school teacher is probably a better teacher than Patrick Mahomes. But if you were in a football game and you had to win the game, you had one last drive, you had the ball, who would you want, your school teacher or Patrick Mahomes? I would pick Patrick Mahomes probably. And so you need the right person for the right job. And Saul was not the right person for the right job. And Saul would have probably been better as a model for Nike robes or flip-flops or something like that. But the main point, though, is that if we remember from last week, Israel wanted a king, and now they are getting what they want. They're getting what they want. They wanted someone who looked good and was powerful, or looked powerful, instead of someone who was a perfect leader, which is what they had with God. And so Saul was selfish. He didn't care about what other people thought, or he didn't care about doing the right thing. And so Samuel, though, he tries to help Saul. He goes, "Hey, if you have any issues, here's what you need to do. You need to go to a place called Gilgal, wait there 7 days, and then I will come and I'll talk to God and make an offering to God for you." And so he's like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And this is sometimes what our parents do. They go, "Hey, if you're ever lost, here's what you do. Find an adult and have them call me." Or maybe they say, "Hey, if a ball goes in the road, what do? You don't just run out. You look both ways, make sure it's clear, and then you can go get the ball out of the road." Or anything like that. Now, some time has passed, and Saul was in a little bit of trouble, okay? There was an army that was gathering and forming, and Saul's army was terrified. They were super scared, and they were trembling with fear. And so even some of them started to run away. And so Saul does what Samuel told him. He goes to Gilgal. He waits 7 days, but Samuel has not shown up yet. And so he's like, what do I do? The sun is starting to set. The seventh day is almost over. What would I do? So it makes me think, what would we do if we were trying to do what Samuel said and he hasn't shown up yet? You may be in a little bit of fear. What would you be thinking? And so Saul decides to make an offering. And is this a good idea or bad idea? It ends up being a bad idea. So Saul, he gets his stuff, he starts making an offering, and just as he is finishing this offering, guess who shows up? Samuel. Samuel shows up, and he is not happy with Saul. And so he walks up to him, and he sees what Saul's done, and he asks, What have you done? What have you done? You didn't follow all my instructions. And now, how many of you guys have gotten in trouble before? I've gotten in trouble. I'm sure you have too. And when we do something wrong, there's a good way to handle things. A lot of times, the best way is to apologize for what we've done or try to make it right. Saul does not do this. He actually turns it on him. He goes, well, I did what you told me to do, Samuel. I did everything you told me to do, and you didn't show up. And he blames even like the people for being scared. Like, well, the army was running away. What else was I supposed to do? You didn't show up on time. And I had to make the offering. I had to because you weren't here. And this is not the right way to handle things when you're in trouble. And so Samuel is not too pleased with Saul. And so he ends up telling him this in 1 Samuel 13 and 14. How foolish, Samuel exclaimed. You have not kept the commands of the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must come to an end. For the Lord has sought out a man after his heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. So he tells him there's a consequence. Saul, you are not going to be king forever because of what you've done. And there will be a new king who loves God and pursues him in all that he does, who has his heart after God. And Saul would face some serious consequences because he disobeyed God. So Saul was not a good king. He was a bad king. And this was the consequence also for Israel wanting a human king. And so what about you? Have you ever, will you wait on God and follow him? Like maybe God has you right where he wants you. And do you pursue him where you're at? And God promises that he's going to lead you and show you where you need to go, like a GPS does on like a phone. Ruth did. She followed God into a potentially scary and unfamiliar place, but God made her the great-grandma of King David, who we're going to be learning about soon, and a great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma of Jesus himself. And Saul had the potential to be a really great king, but he stopped following what God had told him to do. And so God gives us two ways to follow him right now. One is to make him the king of your life. And we talk about this in the ABCs, that we admit, believe, and choose. And so admit is admit that you are a sinner, that you've made mistakes. And then believe that Jesus died for you, that he rose again, and choose him as in charge of your life, meaning that you will follow him wherever he points you. So the other way God says is by also like obeying our parents, is that God says that we should obey our parents. And Samuel was God's spokesman in Saul's life. So Saul had Samuel speaking into his life, and we have our parents speaking into our lives. And so Ephesians 6:1 also says, children, obey your parents. So do you listen to your parents like Saul listened to Samuel, or do you fully obey and listen to them? And ask Jesus to help you, and he will. So that comes to the end of our lesson for today. Be sure to check out the Grace Kid podcast and all things coming up at visitgracechurch.com/kids. We'll see ya.